Blender 5.2 is here, and the new VSE features are awesome. Let's get started.
Frenzy.
Hi, I'm Justin. Welcome to Blender Frenzy, and as always, the information in this video comes from developer.blender.org. So go there, click on Docs, Release Notes, 5.2 LTS, scroll down and click on Video Sequencer, and this is the page where I get all of the information for what I cover in my video. Now, I don't cover every single thing, but just because I don't cover something doesn't mean it's not important. Everybody at the Blender team is doing an awesome job, working tirelessly to make Blender better, especially the VSE, so keep up the good work and come to this page if you want to know more in full of what 5.2 LTS has to offer. And having said that, let's dive into some of these new awesome features. Okay, first up, strip thumbnails have some updated options, including by default now you have the start and the end frames that are shown only. So if you come over here to overlays, make sure that that is on. And now down in thumbnails, we have three options. So we have either none, strip ends, or continuous. It used to be by default, it was continuous, and I always changed it to none because I just basically looked at the preview because it bogged down my system. Having this be continuous does have a lot more CPU usage and therefore lag. And when you're scrolling in and out, you can see it updates in real time. And it constantly is refreshing. This is actually really nice to have if you still want a visual down in the timeline. So enable strip ends, and then it will only show the start and end frame of each strip, which only has to be rendered once, and it doesn't need to be updated. And then when you do make a cut, of course, it's going to have now a new start and end frame, but that, again, only has to be rendered once. And now for the next one, we have to have Prefetch Frames on. So hover your mouse over the sequencer, press N, click Prefetch Frames, and now you can see this bar up here. Now I'm going to see if I can try to make this bigger. If I go to my Preferences, Interface, and if I just click and drag and scale this up, yeah. And what Prefetch Frames does is just fetches this frames into cache, and you can adjust these settings in the preferences, and I'll show you that in just a second. But this is just so, like, if you have a lot of cuts and a lot of edits and all of that stuff here, it'll prefetch all of that for you so that you can play it and then it won't skip. At least that's the theory. So, and you can play it there and then constantly updates as you play. So you can see this is moving as I go along. Now, this slows down quite a bit if you have a lot of edits, especially meta strips. It doesn't like meta strips very much. So, but the point is, actually, we've had that prefetch frames for a while, but now it fetches 5 frames prior to the playhead. So this is the playhead. If we go backwards, it's not going to hang, at least if we're hitting our arrow keys. So this is just arrow key left, arrow key right. And I don't do that a lot, but I think that just got really frustrating for people who, when they try to arrow back, it hanged a lot because of the prefetch. So this is just another nice quality of life thing. Okay, let's put this back down to 1.2 or whatever you have it. You don't have to put it there. I do 1.2 so that you can see it a little bit better. Sometimes maybe 1.3. And to change the amount that prefetch caches, go down to System, scroll all the way down, Memory Cache Limit right here. You can just move that up or down, increase or decrease the amount of cache that's stored. Okay, so next up we have proper support for importing videos with multi-streams. So if I import this After Effects template, you can see it has 2 video streams. So now this properly updates. Now, this doesn't actually really work because After Effects templates don't actually work in Blender. So you can see it's all garbled there. So I don't know exactly what that does, but if I disconnect those and delete that, then you have the video. So if you have a video with several different audio streams, it'll show up here as multiple audios. And speaking of audio, now if we come to render and render audio, I'm just going to render this as test and then Mixdown. And you can see down here, we have a progress bar that tells you how long that's going to take, and with an X that you can cancel it out. Now previously when rendering audio, once you hit Mixdown, it would just hang until it was done and you didn't know when that was going to be. So this is now more consistent with all the other stuff that you render out in Blender. Next is something a little miscellaneous, but if we hover over here again, press N, go down to Proxy, make sure our video strip is selected. The functionality for rendering timecode files has been discontinued. So there used to be another section here where you can select different timecode files, which produced a file called .blend_tc. That functionality was to help seeking within video files, but a lot of stuff in Blender on the back end has improved, especially in the VSE recently, which is awesome. And so therefore they just didn't need that functionality anymore. Okay, so those were the sequencer specific updates. Let's move on to the preview updates. Let's click this button here and go over to playback. We now have an option if we scroll down to show scrubbing region. And now we have a scrubbing region right here in the preview. Why is this important? Well, if you hover over here, I'm going to show you functionality if you don't know, Control Spacebar will maximize this view. Now you can either hit Control Spacebar again or click back to previous, and that can be done in any area. So you hover over the area, Control Spacebar. So if you didn't know that, you're welcome. But now if we Control Spacebar, we now still have the ability to scrub where previously we didn't. We'd have to either just play and pause, or we just had to go back out and look at it and scrub and then come here, go back in. So having this scrubbing region here is very, very useful when you have the preview maximized. Okay, this next one is really cool. So here's some images that I have from my recent trip to the John Wayne Museum. And they had this AI picture where you just stand there and it takes a picture of you and it puts you as a cowboy. So that's me as an older cowboy, although I'm increasingly looking more and more like this, in my face at least. I'm not a cowboy. But anyway, if I select one, you can see, just make sure these overlays are on and you can see different things here. Make sure you have image outline, and then this little dot here in the middle is the origin. We now have the option, if we go to image transform, we can move the origin. Now the default hotkey is Control period, and that does not work for me. That's some other functionality that switches modes, and I don't know what it does really specifically. Does it switch this? No, I think I checked that. No, but I have to. Okay, does that work? Okay. Yeah, I have to toggle that if I accidentally click that. So instead of using the shortcut, I'm just going to click Move Origin. And now I can just drag this. And it has these snapping options where it snaps to different places. So I can snap to the corner. Oh, okay, yeah. I was moving the origin for both of them. Interesting. Let's just select this one. There we go. Okay, now move origin. Okay, now it just snaps. That's easier. So now I can just rotate that and it will rotate around that corner. And I can choose any of these corners, but I can also choose to have it rotate around any of the other pictures' origins. So if I move the origin, I can snap it to this origin or this origin here. And it's a little bit hard because, again, it's recognizing a whole bunch of different things here. So it's recognizing this edge. Maybe just hide that. Let's do that move origin again. There we go. And try to get in the middle here. I think that would be the center of that one. And now I can rotate it around the center of that. So that's a really useful feature, especially for motion graphics. We also have new composition guides. And I think we had these before, but they have been updated to reflect the 3D camera options for composition guides. So this looks just like in the 3D camera, but now we have the functionality in the VSE. So we can do the thirds, center, diagonal, ratio, triangle, all of the stuff. And so you can do that, but you can also change the color so that you can see them better if you wanted to. Very easy and very useful. Okay, so something else that's been updated are the scopes again, and you can come to display mode to see those. Luma waveform, RGB, Chroma vector scope, and the histogram have all been updated, just different functionalities. They now support HDR and a wide gamut color space. Now, I don't use these all that often, but for those who do, that is a good quality of life improvement. And the last update for the preview is a fix, which I actually can't recreate, but I'll show you here. The VSE Alpha Over does not preserve compositor glow. So if we scroll down, you can see the image with the glow created with a 3D scene and the compositor. And then here's the main, here's the fix with alpha over glow, but then you have these artifacts around the edges. This fixes that. So that's what it would look like instead of this. If you want to see this, just go to projects.blender.org/blender/polls/159793, and you can see Aras right here giving us a full rundown of everything that we need to know about that. So thank you, Aras. So if you've been living under a rock and don't know about the new compositor modifier starting in Blender 5.0, then let me show you that real quick. I'm going to drag out another area here, and we're going to change this to the compositor. So let's pull this out over here. And your strip properties have also moved in 5.0, if you didn't know. So if you hover over here and press N, it used to be here. You have your properties and your modifiers over here. But now you only have tool, cache, and proxy, and your strip properties have moved up over here in your properties editor type, and your strip modifiers as well. So go to strip modifiers and go to add modifier, but the only options we're getting are for audio because we have our audio selected. So let's select our video, go to add modifier, and now we have a new compositor modifier. Click new, and then we can title this anything, green screen. And now we can either choose it from here in the new, or we can go to scene, and now we have a new sequencer. We can choose that. This is useful for all sorts of compositing effects that go straight back into the VSE as the result. This is one of the biggest and best things that's ever happened to the VSE. So what we're going to do is come down here, Shift A, add a keying node, drop it right in here, and then we're going to select this color, select the eyedropper tool, and then choose this, and boom, you can see right back out into the VSE. This works just like geometry nodes. So you have your group input that is from the video strip compositor modifier. So this is your input, and it comes in, goes through the keying node, and then comes back out to your group output, which is the output in the preview of the VSE. But we've gone over all of this before. This is just a quick recap if you haven't been caught up to speed. But as customary for Blender these past few years, this functionality has drastically improved already. So the first improvement in 5.2 is now we have arbitrary input. So this is looking more and more like geometry nodes. So what I mean by that is we can take this key color and drag it over here. We have an extra socket to plug it in right into this input, and boom, it is revealed right here. And now we can actually come over here and select the color of the key that we want to for this right in the VSE. We don't even have to have the compositor modifier open after we get all of our inputs plugged in like we want. So we can do this for blur size. I'm hoping. Yep, so blur size. Look at that. We can basically just do all of these here. And then the mask, I believe that's going to be this mask input. So if we create a mask elsewhere, we can input it here, and then we can plug that mask into the mask over here. Let's zoom in, and we can plug it into the garbage matte or the core matte, but I'm not going to do that. We'll just leave it like this. So then we can just close this, and now we have a green screen compositor modifier here that we can just adjust on the fly here in the VSE. And we can even just have it play as we adjust these things, which is super nice. So black levels, white levels. Now you can't see the black level and white level because we'd have to change this into an actual black and white matte for that. But definitely like the blur size and the dilate size. See, I like this because it's just, it's something that you can do in real time. And the balance, the despill balance, look at that. See, you can see the green around the edges, and we just take this balance and just slide it over to the left, and you get rid of that green. Look at that. That's already looking really good here. Maybe a little bit too blurry. Maybe still too blurry up here. We'll just bring that down to 0. Yeah, something like that. Okay, so along with this is something you can't see, but it is something that in the background is working. So if your compositor nodes have any transparency, if the result is transparency like this, it calculates that transparency only if there is transparency. So if there isn't any transparency, and we just, let's just plug this straight away in here. This is just the original image going right into the output. Then it's not going to automatically calculate transparency, which will make it faster when it's rendering. Just a different kind of calculations. I guess previously it would always just assume that there was transparency. And I believe that's because they had some issues when they were first implementing this with reading transparency from a node going into the group output. So maybe they just say, okay, we're just going to treat it all as transparency. I don't know exactly. But now it doesn't. Now it is specific to whether there is transparency or whether there is not. Now this compositor modifier exists on this video strip. But now in 5.2, we have a standalone effect strip that is a compositor or compositor effect strip. And to demonstrate this, let's go to here. I'm going to do a transition between this fire and then this library shot here. And I'm going to go ahead and get rid of the audio because we don't need it right here. These are all still connected. You can see this link here. But something I've found out recently, this is just a side tip, I think this has existed in Blender for quite some time, but you can actually select by type. So if you go to select grouped, and the hotkey is Shift G, you can choose to select different things. So we can say type, and then it's going to select all my videos because that is the active selection. That's the white highlight there. So if I select one of the audios and do the same thing, let's do Shift G, type. Now we have all of those selected without having to disconnect these in order to select just those. So I'm just going to delete those. So just a quick pro tip there for you. Now we can drag this up and over here. I'm going to select this one, shift select this one, and then go to add and then compositor. And now we have the compositor effect strip. Now this works just like any other effect strip. It doesn't exist on its own. You can't move it around. You can move it up and down, but you can't move it side to side or anywhere else. It is relying upon these two, and you can see it grows the more these overlap. So we've got this modifier, which is just black right now. So if we select this, now we can add a modifier, any other modifier, but if we add a compositor modifier to the compositor effect strip, it's kind of like Inception, and we don't want to do that. This is where it becomes a little confusing, but I'll show you the quick functionality first. So with this, we can, I'm just going to click New, and now we have a new group input, and we can, I'll just say crossfade, because that is really what we're going to do. Input 1, input 2, and the effect fader. So let's add a color, mix color. So there's your input 1, input 2. So input 1 is going to be your first one that you selected, and then the second one you selected. If it's backwards, I'll show you that in just a second. And then the effect fader plugs right into the factor, and now you can see that fade. It's just a simple crossfade. Now there's a whole bunch more you can do with this, with two video strips or images or whatever that are crossing over. You can do pixel fade. You can do all these different things. I don't know how to do that. I haven't messed around with that. This is the easiest for demonstration. Now, if for some reason the inputs are reversed, all you have to do in the compositor is just reverse these and then just refresh over here. This is what it would look like if it's incorrect. So if you selected these the wrong way, you're supposed to select them kind of in order. This one first, then shift this one. But if you accidentally do it the wrong way, or Blender just glitches out and it then looks like this, it goes right to the next video and then starts to fade backwards and then goes back into the video. This is one fix. Another fix that you can do is just swap the properties here. If we select that, go to the strip properties. Now we have, for the effects strip, we have our crossfade here. And we have our input 1 and input 2. We can just click one of these buttons to swap them. And so now, of course, this is backwards. So if it looks like this, you come over here, just swap them there. Now, the default fade, this is your effect fader. So if I uncheck that, so you can see effect fader, and I can do, I don't exactly know how that works. I guess I would have to maybe make my own animation for this, but no, I don't want to do that. So default fade is fine, and then it just does it for me. Now, The caveat of this is you can't have any more inputs in here. Let's just add in a math node here and plug it into the effect fader. And then if we look at this, that's just going to give us, if we add to it negative values here, so essentially subtract, it fades differently and not at all if we go too far. I'm not sure how you would use this in practicality. I just wanted to demonstrate this input. So if we come over here, there is an input socket we can plug into, and you can see it adds a new value, but there's no place out here where you can access this, because remember, this is not the actual compositor modifier. This is part of the strip properties itself of the compositor strip. Now, an actual Blender developer, Adas, commented on one of my live streams recently talking about this very thing. And essentially what he said was that the work needed to expose them is different from the work for the compositor modifier and doesn't happen automatically or easily. So shout out to Adas. Thank you so much for actually commenting and letting me know about that specific thing. They are working on it, but unfortunately it's not going to be for 5.2. But that is okay. Adas, keep up the great work. Moving on, but staying with the compositor modifier, is GPU acceleration is now possible. So if we hover over the compositor, press N, and then go to options. Yes, options, tab, and there we go. Device, GPU or CPU. You can do precision, full, or auto. Now this functionality already existed in the compositor, but now we have it in the sequencer as well. But just note that it won't slow down everything, and it will fall back to the CPU for certain nodes, I think. But they're still working on that. They're still improving that every day. Let's go ahead and get rid of that. And I don't even know how would I get rid of this value here. I think I go to group. Yeah, okay, let's get rid of that. Okay, so back to the compositor modifier. Something else that's new here is these options up here. So the first one I'll talk about is this dropdown. We now have the similar options to other places in Blender with modifiers and geometry nodes and stuff. But here we can actually uncheck show node group, and then that gets rid of that. And then we can just rename this to green screen here. And that just makes it a little bit more appealing to the eyes. Appealing aesthetically. And it also gets rid of redundancy. We also now have the ability to disable the modifier in the preview, but that doesn't change the render. Essentially, this is allowing you to have greater control over the preview behavior, just like in the 3D viewport, where you can disable things in the preview but still include it in the render, or disable it in the render and just see it in the preview. So as the functionality of the compositor modifier that connects the compositor with the VSE keeps improving, you're going to see more and more really nifty features and updates. And so 5.2 has introduced something new. If we go to add modifier, you can actually add a camera lens effect or a creative effect with a couple of presets already defined for you. So this will automatically add, for example, a vignette type thing. We're going to drag it. This is its own, a compositor modifier, just like the one we created, but it's pre-made for us. So if we drag this to the top, now we have that vignette around here, and we have the feather and the factor. Now this is something that you can make for yourself, and in fact, if we need to make sure it's selected, because just like geometry nodes, what you see down here in the compositor is reflected on what you select up here. So you can see that blue outline. This means the vignette is selected. And you can see down here it also says vignette. So this is the node group that makes up the vignette. And you can go in each of these, I think, oh, not that one, but you can tab into each of these and see what makes this. And this is a little bit more complicated than I would have imagined. You could make this yourself. You could go in here. I think you can tweak this. This is packed into Blender, but I think if I click, yeah, I can click it, unpack it, and make it local so that I can tweak it myself. You can give it more functionality. You can add your own inputs. So right now you can see the group inputs here. These are all the things that are coming out here that you can adjust without going into the compositor editor type. So as I said, the more this improves, I'm sure we're going to get more presets here, and you can have your own. So this is unassigned. I can actually assign my green screen here, boom, as one of those presets. Well, I didn't assign it as a preset, but I can still choose it from here as a preset. So I don't actually have to, let's see, let's just cut this here. I'm going to delete both of these from the second one. If I come here and yeah, I can just go and add the green screen again, really quick. I don't have to recreate it like we did before. Now, if you did recreate it, it's not that big of a deal. You can just do compositor and then you choose it here, but it's just one less step to do. Boom, boom. So actually, real quick, let's demonstrate this on another video. So I have a separate video here that has a green screen that's slightly different. Let's see, we can get rid of that, don't need that. So you can see a slightly different shade of green. But what we can do is select this, come to Add Modifier, Unassigned, and choose our green screen. And the cool thing about this, I can take this and I can adjust this separately to get a proper green there, or I can actually even just disable it here, and then take the color picker and pick the exact color that I'm looking for, and then turn that back on. And this is not going to affect this one at all. You can see that these two are clearly different shades of green that are being used. And at first I didn't understand why this was working. Now I do, because since this would not work if these were disconnected. So if we just disconnect all of these, now you have all of the settings are in the compositor. And then all of the settings apply here. So if I change this here in the compositor, come over here and refresh it, you can see I'm not keying out that green, and you do have to come over here and refresh it. So it's not in real time, unfortunately, this way. But it's the same, this is using the same exact color. But when we have these plugged in, now it's the group input, which is here, that is feeding that color into this one. And that group input is different for each one of them, which actually has the added benefit of we don't have to duplicate our keying node here. We just have to have one keying node or one keying compositor modifier with all of the inputs that we want, and then the inputs are determined per strip per video. And that is something I did not know until I was recording, explaining it, and then I discovered it, and that is really, really cool. Way to go, Blender, you rock. There are also a couple of improvements regarding calculations. So for example, rendering, I just made this quick mask here. So I'm just going to go to the mask input, mask, and then choose the mask for that. And then I'll just plug that straight away in here. And now you can see that mask, and that's the only thing that was coming out. If the mask was blank, this used to be transparent. But if a mask is actually plugged in and there's nothing in the mask, it makes sense to have it black. So now the mask is just black. And you can change the color of the mask right here, apparently. I didn't know that. That looks cool. But this goes away once we actually add that mask in. Then that option is no longer there because we're using this. So again, better calculations for what you would expect for masks. And the other one is Colorspace, actually Colorspace Conversions. So by default, the VSE would convert linear space or other color spaces to sRGB automatically. And then when you would render it out, it would render it into whatever color space that you had it. But if you just took an EXR image sequence and you just wanted to render that out into a movie, well, you have to go through a conversion to sRGB, and then when you render it into the movie, it would reconvert it back into linear. But that doesn't make sense if you just want to take something that's linear and just make it into a movie. So we're basically skipping the middleman conversion. Just know that when you import stuff into the VSE now, it doesn't automatically convert the color space. It only does it if it needs to. And last in this section, speaking of linear color space, they got rid of linear modifiers option here that was right above the add modifier. Apparently this was just a hack and it was only used for HDR inputs anyway. But now with all of the improvements that they've made, they don't need this button anymore, so they got rid of it. So some of the sequencer strips have been updated. We're going to start with the color. So I use that as the background color here. Let's go to strip properties, and what we have in our transform now added along with the scale is width and height. And this is in pixels. So I can actually change this to a specific pixel amount here for my color strip image thing here. Now apparently this is common functionality with many other video editors out there. I don't know, I don't use any other video editors, I only use Blender. But this is really useful for, I'm sure, lots of different things. I can think of something that's useful for me as if I'm needing to post something on a website that has different kinds of dimensions. For example, one dimension for their thumbnail on their homepage, like Blender Nation, and then another for the banner when you click on it and go in there. And so you can actually make your own little guides. So for example, if I duplicate this here, made this just a slightly desaturated color, you know, maybe something like that. So you can see now I have the dimensions of the entire banner, but I can also now see where the thumbnail is going to be cropped, and I can use this as a guide, as an overlay, if I put this in a meta strip and then maybe make this a little bit transparent. Just be used as a guide. I'm just something off the top of my head I can think that would be useful for. And here's a pro tip in all of Blender if you didn't know. To set these back to the original default values, you just hover over them and press Backspace. That works for pretty much any slider or any option that Blender has here. Opacity, Backspace, colors, a whole bunch of different things. So if you didn't know that, you're welcome. Now next up is something else that has an awesomely huge update, and that is the text strip. Let's go ahead and add in a better text other than the default. I already had that in the cache, but to do that you can just click Open Font, and then Blender should give you access to all of your fonts that you have here. But the very first thing that should immediately stand out to you if you use any text strips is this big text box that now has this corner handle that you can drag and expand. And yes, that means you can paste in a whole bunch of text now. It used to only be one line. Until 5.2, it was one line. So even just this last update, 5.1, didn't have this. And if you're familiar with editing in the VSE and text strips, you know how big of a deal this is, because it was a pain. If you wanted to add a whole bunch of text, you would have to duplicate this text strip here again and again and again for different lines. And that was just not practical at all. But now we can paste a whole bunch of stuff. And what I pasted here is actually from the release notes for the text strips. So exactly what I'm talking about right now. And you have all of the same text options that you would expect, including your wrap width, which I'm going to pull down. Let's do, 5.5. And we can also move this over on the X. You can see that they still haven't adjusted the text overlay outline. That seems to be relative to the origin, which stays in the same spot, which it's supposed to right now. But if that bothers you, you can just turn off the overlays. Specifically, you can say image outline and keep the other ones on, or just turn them off altogether. And then you can use this on the Y as a credits roll, which I know is something really useful probably for a lot of creators and video editors in the VSE. Another pro tip, you have to do it from here, from the layout. This is the text effect strip. If you do it from the transform, it's going to cut stuff off. So let's actually move that down a little bit here, a little bit more to where it's like right in the middle. And then if we try to move that up, you can see it cuts it off, because the transform only calculates within the boundaries of the preview. And this is something I just really don't like. Even though we still have the entire text thing, it's only calculating it from where I originally started the position 0 here. So it's the same with above and below, wherever that's cut off. So just keep that in mind. But we also have some new options. The first being this line spacing here. So if I click and drag, you can see it increases the spacing between the lines. And this actually has two options, or two modes. The first mode by default is relative mode, and that's relative to the size. So if I increase the size of the text, it's going to increase the size between the text relative to the size of the text. But I can also use absolute mode by pressing this button here, and that is absolute pixel size. So I can decide, okay, I want this to be 100 pixels and not change. And then when I increase the size of the text, you can see the text keeps growing, but the spacing does not change. And eventually you're going to have overlapping text. So you can see there's a lot of flexibility with this. Now, one thing that they don't have yet that I hope is coming soon is a letter spacing. That would just be amazing. Now, I know that functionality exists elsewhere in Blender, in Blender's 3D text and geometry nodes and stuff. You can do that with, but you can't do it here yet. It's just one more thing. And I know just one more thing is like a whole bunch of hundreds and hundreds of lines of code. So I get it. It's not that easy, but it would complete the package for me. But we do have another added feature. And if you have been paying attention to what I've actually pasted here, text strips now support style presets. So Blender text presets. And you can find them up here with this button, text style presets. If I click that, there are currently only 3 default ones, but if I click corner title, boom, right there. Now this is relative to the origin being in the middle. So don't move your text with G like this, click and drag, which is the same thing I was talking about down here, which the position over here and the scale and stuff. So use the actual text effect strip options here if you want to do any of that. So we've got corner title, we've got main title, and we've got subtitle. And you can see the size, the color, outline, shadow, all of this changes per preset. And you can even create your own preset. So let me actually get back to mine. I'm going to undo this. Yep, so this is my own. Let's turn off that overlay again. So let's just say that I want to make this a preset. I can come down here and type in credits for that preset. And if I hit enter, it still hasn't created it. I have to actually click this button here, the plus, and then it adds it up here. So now I can cycle through these different presets, main title, subtitle, or credits. Now, they're not just credits, they're kind of right-hand credits. And unfortunately, I can't just click here and rename it. So a quick hack is just to make sure you have your preset loaded, then just write a new name. So right-hand credits, enter, and then plus. And then we can just delete this one from here. So it's the same thing, but now it's called something different. So yeah, the text now has so much more functionality than it used to. I'm super happy about that. And last but not least, new functionality has been added to scene strips. So to demonstrate this, I have created a 3D scene over here. Let's go to all. Let's turn the overlays off here. So that's what that looks like. And this is in cycles. So I've got the background only with the shadows, and I've got the objects only. So let's go over to video editing here. Now, one thing to note, you have to have your sequencer scene and your 3D scene be different scenes. So you can see this is pinned to my 3D scene that I've named 3D. You can see I have different scenes here. And then the video editing is pinned to my scene strips here. So they can't be the same scene, it has to be a different scene. So on your scene strips or your sequencer scene, go to add and then scene, and then you can choose from the other scenes. This is why you have to have more than one. So I'm going to choose 3D here. And the first thing I'm going to do is open up the properties in the preview, go to view, and then down here, scene strip display. I can change this from solid to rendered. In our strip properties with scene, we now have a new option called view layer. Now you want to also make sure you're selecting the right camera. I only have one, but let's go ahead and select it just so that we can cover all of our bases. And so right now we have the objects, we have background, and this is taking a long time. So with you have to have a pretty beefy system. Let's make sure EV is, or cycles is GPU compute. Okay, it is, but for some reason, it still chugs when I switch this here. But there you go. You can choose the view layer. That is the new functionality. So we've got objects, background, or all, and there you go. Now, why would this be useful? Well, I can show you at least what I came up with, which probably isn't all that great, but still you can get the idea. Let's do background here for this one. Here's what not to do. If you duplicate it, it's actually going to duplicate and make a separate scene. So I'm going to show you here. So this is 3D right here. I'm going to Shift D to duplicate that up. So now I have 3D.001. And if I come to the dropdown, I have actually created a new scene. This actually really confused me when I was testing it out just a little bit ago. So I'm not going to do that way. I'm going to actually undo that because I don't want that scene at all. So that got rid of that scene. What I can do is I can come over to some place in the middle and then create a cut. Now this also says 3D.001, but it didn't create an extra scene. So I don't know why. I don't know how that works, but now we've cut it. And on this one, I'm going to choose the objects. Okay. And so let's move this one up, Alt-O to clear the offset, select this one, Alt-O to clear that offset. And now you can see they blend together. Now, if they're not blending together for you, you need to click transparent for the top one at least, because if that's not transparent, then it's just going to be black. So you click transparent here, and then it should change to transparency here. But you also have to make sure that your 3D scene has transparency in the background. So for cycles on our render, I have to scroll down to film and then click transparent. So you have to do all of that in order to have that transparency calculate through to the VSE. And once you've done that, this is what it looks like. And why is this helpful? Well, now we have the background as something separate, and I can adjust different things like a color. So if I go to a strip modifier for the background, I can actually add in a color balance and then just start tweaking the color, and you can see in real time that color is tweaked. See, and even if you didn't use this, because this is still really slow, like if you were to render this out, this would be incredibly slow. I mean, just going from one frame to the next frame is like, I mean, I'm not even rendering anything, and it's really chugging. See, I'm as we're talking, see, I moved at like what, 20 seconds ago. So this might not be very practical. Plus, also, you're not getting these reflections from the ground back up onto the objects. It's only changing the color in post-production, essentially. It's only changing the color here. But this would be good to visualize something. As you can see, I'm changing it, and it's just, I'm changing it in iterations without cycles having to recalculate everything. So that's just one case example where something like this might be useful. So there you go. Those are the awesome new VSE features in Blender 5.2 LTS. I'm so glad that it is an LTS because this is a great version to have a long-term support for. So again, if you want to see these features in more detail, go to developer.blender.org. Also, let me know which features were your favorite, or maybe there were some that surprised you that you didn't expect. Let me know in the comments, and you will see me in the next one.